The kingdom of Zubiri was known far and wide as the kingdom of burning gold. Its lands shimmered beneath the sun as though the soil itself held molten treasure. The rivers glowed amber when dusk touched their surface, and the air carried the faint scent of smoke and spice, as if the earth remembered the first fire that had ever burned there. It was a land where everything seemed touched by warmth, except the heart of its king. King Olin was a ruler of balance and wisdom, feared in war and beloved in peace. Yet behind his steady gaze hid a sorrow that no crown could conceal. Years ago his first wife, Queen Amelie, had died while giving birth to their only daughter. It was said that the skies wept for 3 days after her passing, and that thunder rolled across the mountains like the sound of drums mourning a fallen queen. In her absence, Olin had built temples of marble and gold, but none could fill the silence her laughter once left behind. His daughter, Zola, grew beneath that silence like a candle struggling to burn in still air. From her mother, she had inherited a gentleness that touched every soul in the palace. Servants whispered that when Zola smiled, even the flowers seemed to lift their heads a little higher toward her light. Yet to her father she was both blessing and wound, a living reminder of what he had lost. He watched her grow with pride but also with pain, for every time she spoke, he heard Amelie's voice echo faintly within it. Years passed, and the council began to murmur that the kingdom needed a new queen. A single ruler, no matter how just, could not balance the weight of rule alone. Olin resisted for long, but as loneliness hollowed his nights, he agreed to take another wife. That was when Queen Nyara came into the kingdom like a sunset wrapped in silk. Nyara was a woman of breathtaking beauty. Her eyes were dark and deep as polished obsidian, her skin shimmered like copper beneath torchlight, and her laughter carried a spell that made men forget their doubts. She arrived from the distant southern provinces with a caravan of gold, incense, and mystery. Her words were sweet as palm wine, her manner humble, yet her gaze measured everything she saw, the walls, the throne, and the child who stood beside it. At first Zola adored her. Nyara spoke softly to her, braided her hair, and told stories by lamplight of rivers that ran red at sunset and spirits who whispered secrets to those who listened. The king, too, found his heart easing in her presence. It seemed for a time that the kingdom had found balance again. But the palace elders, old as mountain stones, watched quietly. They said that beauty such as Nyara's never walked alone, it carried its own shadow. There were nights when strange winds crept through the corridors, carrying the faint sound of laughter when no one was near. The temple lamps flickered for no reason. Once, when Zola entered the great hall, every flame in the torches flared high as if bowing to her presence. Nyara noticed. Behind her gentle smile, something coiled tighter each day. Zola, innocent and kind, saw only the best in everyone. She would visit the kitchens, play among the guards, and light candles at her mother's shrine. She was her mother's echo, yet brighter, too bright perhaps for those who feared being overshadowed. The people of Zubiri began to whisper songs about the Princess of Light, the child whose laughter made torches dance. They said she was blessed by the goddess of fire herself. When Nyara heard the songs, her heart hardened like cooling metal. King Olin, blind to the slow poison of envy forming in his queen, continued to trust her. He believed the gods had sent him a second chance at happiness. He could not see how Nyara's eyes followed Zola, measuring her every step, or how her lips tightened each time the king smiled at his daughter. In the heart of the royal courtyard stood an ancient flame, an eternal fire said to have burned since the founding of the kingdom. It was tended by priests day and night, its light a symbol of truth and justice. The elders told that when lies clouded the land, the fire dimmed. When truth prevailed, it blazed brighter. Zola loved to sit near it, tracing shapes in the sand and listening to the crackle of burning wood. She said the fire spoke sometimes, though only in whispers. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Nyara stood by that flame, her reflection dancing in its light. "You burn for truth," she whispered to it, her voice as soft as the hiss of embers. "But every fire can be bent to serve the hand that feeds it." The flame flickered once as if it heard her, and then grew still again. From that night onward, the kingdom's warmth began to change. The air seemed thicker, the sunsets redder, and the once golden river shimmered with a strange, darker hue. The king dismissed it as season's whim, but the elders knew otherwise. Something unseen was shifting, something tied to envy and fire. And in the silence of her chambers, Nyara began to weave thoughts as sharp as blades, while the eternal flame outside her window burned quietly on, waiting for the day it would speak, not with words of warmth, but with the voice of judgment. For in the kingdom of burning gold, no lie could hide forever from the fire that remembered truth. Zola grew as the kingdom's brightest flame, the child of dawn who carried light wherever she walked. When she was born, the midwives swore that the sky glowed even before the sun rose, and a line of golden birds appeared on the palace roof as if heralding her arrival. Her skin shone with the soft hue of morning, and her laughter carried a rhythm that felt older than the wind. From her earliest days, even the smallest things seemed to lean toward her. The flowers in the royal gardens opened when she approached, the palace cats purred and followed her steps, and the guards, hardened men of battle, found themselves smiling whenever she passed by. As she grew, so did her grace. Zola loved to rise before dawn, climbing the marble stairs to the highest balcony where the first light touched the city. She would stand there in her white linen dress, watching as the world below woke from sleep. The city adored her for this habit, for they believed her presence helped call the sun back each day. When she waved at the farmers beyond the walls, they bowed in return, saying, "May the daughter of light bless the harvest." Her compassion stretched farther than her father's rule. She visited the sick in the villages, carrying baskets of herbs and warm food, always barefoot so she could feel the earth's heart, as she called it. The elders would whisper that she carried her mother's spirit, reborn to guide the kingdom once more. But inside the palace, that very purity began to cast long shadows. Queen Nyara watched from her gilded windows, her lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. Each laugh that escaped Zola's mouth felt to her like a dagger, small, bright, and sharp. She would see how the servants bowed to Zola more deeply than they bowed to her, how the guards softened their tone when the princess spoke, and how the king's weary eyes lit up when his daughter entered a room. It made Nyara's blood hum with a restless ache. One evening during a grand feast, Zola walked into the hall wearing a dress the color of sunrise. The music stilled for a moment when she entered. The light from 1,000 torches shimmered across her hair, and even the musicians forgot their notes as if spellbound. She greeted the guests with the humility of a child and the dignity of a queen. When she knelt before her father, kissing his hand, the king's heart swelled with pride. Nyara, seated beside him, smiled and poured herself more wine, her fingers tightening around the cup until her knuckles went white. Later that night, Nyara wandered through the empty corridors of the palace. The silence mocked her. She stopped before the tall mirrors that lined the hall and stared at her reflection. She was beautiful, perhaps more beautiful than Zola, but the thought no longer comforted her. There was something eternal about the girl's glow, something untouched by fear or deceit. It was a light that did not dim no matter how deep the night around it. And Nyara, for all her beauty and poise, felt herself fading in its presence. Her envy began as a whisper, then grew into a pulse that would not rest. She began to imagine a future where Zola, grown and radiant, might claim the people's hearts completely, where her own name, Queen Nyara, would fade into dust while songs of Zola the Bright echoed through generations. It was in that moment of silent torment that she heard another whisper, one not born from her own thoughts. The court sorcerer, a man named Bako, had long served in the shadows of the palace. He was old and bent, with eyes that seemed to look beyond the skin of things. He appeared that same night as if summoned by Nyara's jealousy. His voice was slow, like oil sliding across stone. "My queen," he said, bowing low, "there are powers in this world that hide behind light, just as serpents hide beneath blossoms. The princess carries such power." Nyara turned sharply. "What do you mean, old one?" He raised his head, and for a moment his eyes glimmered like embers. "The fire within her, what you call purity, does not belong to mortals. It is said that such light burns brighter before it consumes itself. Fire, your majesty, devours all things, even innocence." Nyara felt a shiver run through her spine. "You speak in riddles. What are you suggesting?" Bako stepped closer, the scent of ash following him. "Light draws envy, envy draws shadow, and shadow always seeks balance. But fire," he paused, leaning so close that his breath warmed her ear, "fire alone can reveal what lies beneath perfection. It cleanses and destroys." Nyara's heart thudded painfully. She thought of the eternal flame in the courtyard, of the way it had flickered the night she stood before it. Could fire truly strip the mask of purity from the girl? Could it expose weakness where none was seen? The sorcerer smiled, sensing the hunger in her silence. "You fear her power, my queen? But fear can be mastered. There are ways to test the truth of a soul's light. Would you like me to show you how?" Nyara hesitated. The palace was quiet around them. The faint crackle of distant torches sounded almost like laughter. Her mind spun. "If she is truly pure," she said slowly, "the gods will protect her. But if she is not—" Bako bowed his head. "Then the fire will speak." From that night onward, Nyara's eyes followed Zola not with admiration, but with calculation. Every kind gesture, every smile, every time the people praised her, Nyara saw not beauty but threat. She began to wear heavier jewels and brighter gowns, as if layers of gold could outshine the girl's natural light. Yet the more she tried, the dimmer she felt. Zola, unaware of the darkness gathering behind her, continued to shine. When she entered the gardens, the birds descended from trees to rest near her feet. When she sang, the torches in the halls flickered gently as though listening. Even the palace guards, who once prided themselves on their stoicism, would stand straighter when she passed and say, "The dawn greets us early today." To the kingdom Zola was hope. To her father she was redemption. But to Nyara she had become a reflection that refused to fade. Each day her envy deepened until it no longer felt like pain, it felt like purpose. And in the deep of night, when all others slept, Nyara began to visit the sorcerer in his hidden chamber beneath the palace, where the smell of burned herbs filled the air and the walls glowed faintly red. There Bako taught her the oldest truth of fire, that it is both light and weapon. By the end of that moon, the queen's heart had found its choice. If the people adored the child of dawn, then she would feed that dawn to the very fire it seemed to worship. Only through flame, she told herself, could peace return to her soul. But deep within the unseen winds, something older than envy began to stir, something that knew the difference between fire born of truth and fire born of spite. Nyara's envy ripened like rot beneath silk. Day after day she wore her crown with a smile that hid the storm twisting in her chest. The court still adored her beauty, but she no longer sought their admiration, only their doubt. Doubt was softer than a blade and far more deadly. It could make a man question the truth before his very eyes, and that was what she intended to plant in the king's heart. It began subtly. A word dropped in passing, a sigh at the right moment, a flicker of sorrow when Zola entered the room. Nyara became a master of shadows, weaving her lies into the fabric of daily life so delicately that even truth began to sound suspicious beside her voice. One evening, she sat beside the king in the royal garden where the air smelled of jasmine and smoke. The moon hung like a silver coin above the eternal flame, which flickered more softly than usual. Nyara turned her gaze to it and murmured, "My king, does it trouble you that the sacred fire dims each night?" Olin frowned. "The priests say it is only the wind. Why do you ask?" She sighed, her tone heavy with concern. "Because the flame has never dimmed before. Not even in the storms of war. But now it weakens, and I have begun to wonder what might disturb the god's light." The king watched her curiously. "You believe something disturbs it?" Nyara hesitated just long enough for the seed of worry to settle. "Forgive me, my husband. I should not speak of such things. But there are whispers among the servants. They say the flame flickers most when the princess passes by." The king's brow tightened. "Whispers are the breath of idle tongues." "Perhaps," Nyara said softly, bowing her head. "And yet, whispers are born from something. Have you not noticed the strange things lately? The mirrors cracking without reason, the torches flaring as though startled? They say light obeys her command, and even the birds outside her window sing when none should." Olin stared into the distance, his jaw tightening. "You think my daughter brings such omens?" "I think," Nyara's voice trembled just enough to seem fragile, "that she might not know the power she carries. It may not be her fault. Sometimes, blessings become curses when not understood. I only fear what the people might say if they noticed these signs." The king rose abruptly, his robes whispering against the stone. "Enough. Zola is my daughter. The gods themselves would strike down any who speak against her." Nyara bowed her head in silence, hiding the small, satisfied smile that crept across her lips. She knew better than to push too far too soon. Seeds needed time and silence to grow. That night, she visited Bako once more in the hidden chambers beneath the palace. The air there was thick with smoke and whispers of old spirits. Candles burned with black flame, their smoke curling like snakes. "She resists suspicion," Nyara hissed, pacing before the sorcerer. "The king's heart is blind." Bako chuckled, his old bones creaking. "He is a father. But fathers can doubt. They only need to see what they cannot explain." He reached for a bowl of dark oil and dipped his finger into it. "Let him see, my queen. Let him witness what he cannot reason away. A cracked mirror, a flickering torch, a flame that trembles when she nears it. These will not accuse her, but they will whisper." Nyara smiled, her eyes glinting like shards of glass. "Do it. Let the palace become her shadow." The sorcerer began his work. He poured the oil into the fire pit at the center of his chamber and chanted words that scraped the air like claws. The flames hissed and changed color, from red to deep blue. From that night on, the palace was no longer still. It began with the mirrors. One morning, the handmaidens found the queen's looking-glass shattered though no one had touched it. The cracks split down the center, dividing Nyara's reflection into two twisted halves. Later, another mirror broke in Zola's chamber while she was brushing her hair. She stared at it, puzzled, while the servants gasped in fear. "The mirror fears her," they whispered. "It breaks rather than see her face." The next omen came at dusk. During the evening prayer, the torches along the palace walls flickered wildly when Zola entered the hall. The flames rose high, burning white instead of gold. When she left, they returned to normal. None dared to speak aloud, but fear spread like dry grass catching a spark. Nyara moved among them like a caring queen, pretending to calm the frightened. "Hush," she would say. "The princess means no harm. The gods bless her with strange gifts, that is all." But her tone carried just enough uncertainty to twist reassurance into suspicion. Soon even the king could not ignore the unease. During a council meeting, he noticed that the flame in the sacred brazier flickered sharply when Zola approached with a message. He dismissed it as coincidence, but when it happened again days later, his heart began to waver. That night he called the high priest to his chamber. "Tell me," he said quietly, "what does it mean when fire recoils from light?" The priest bowed his head. "My king, fire recoils only from itself. It fears being consumed." The king frowned, not understanding, and the priest hesitated before adding, "There are ancient tales of those born with the spirit of flame. Such souls are powerful but dangerous if their light burns unchecked." Olin dismissed him, his thoughts heavy. Could Zola's radiance truly be a curse? His mind fought against the idea, but doubt had already found a small, cruel home there. The next evening Nyara joined him for dinner, her expression soft, her voice gentle. "You have been troubled," she said, touching his hand. "It pains me to see you so. Perhaps we should seek the guidance of the fire gods for the kingdom's peace." Olin studied her. "You speak of purification rites?" "Only a small ceremony," she said, "to cleanse the palace of confusion. The priest can call upon the eternal flame to reveal what hides within us all. It is not judgment, it is truth." The king hesitated. "And if the truth harms the innocent? Then the gods will protect them," she whispered. He looked away, his heart twisting. In his soul he wanted to laugh at the thought. Zola accused of witchcraft? Never. Yet his reason wavered. The cracks, the flickers, the whispers, all pressed against him like unseen hands. Later that night, Zola entered his study carrying a tray of tea. She smiled, her eyes warm and kind. "Father, you have not eaten." He looked at her and felt the ache of guilt crawl up his spine. How could he doubt her? And yet, behind her stood the faint glow of a torch, flickering though there was no wind. Zola noticed his troubled gaze and tilted her head. "Is something wrong?" The king forced a smile and shook his head. "Nothing, my child. Nothing at all." But when she left the room, the torch flared violently, throwing his shadow across the wall like a black wave devouring light. In the silence that followed, the king whispered to himself, "Why does the fire tremble?" And somewhere deep within the palace, in a chamber hidden beneath the stones, Queen Nyara and Bako smiled as the first true crack appeared, not in the mirrors but in the king's faith itself. The moon that rose over the kingdom of burning gold that night was blood orange, its light heavy and strange. The wind carried the scent of smoke and salt from the river, and even the eternal flame in the courtyard swayed uneasily, as though it sensed the coming of something it could not name. 4 days, Queen Nyara had spoken softly to the king about the need for purification, a sacred fire ritual that would restore peace to the kingdom and banish the shadows that haunted its halls. She had spoken not with anger, but with the calm of someone who claimed to seek truth. "My king," she had said, her hands folded humbly in her lap, "the people whisper. They fear the omens. We cannot let superstition weaken your rule. Let us call upon the gods through the fire. Let them speak and burn away whatever curse lies upon us." The king resisted at first, but the burden of doubt weighed upon him like chains. Each night, the fire in his dreams hissed and spoke his daughter's name, though he could never remember the words that followed. Finally, with a weary heart, he agreed. The ritual would take place on the night of the full moon, in the great courtyard where the eternal flame burned. The priests were summoned from distant temples, the elders gathered, and the drums of invocation were readied. Yet unseen by all, Nyara worked in the shadows. With the help of the sorcerer Bako, she prepared the sacred fire pit, not with pure oil and cedarwood as tradition demanded, but with a mixture of cursed herbs and ashes stolen from graves. Beneath the stones, she buried charms made from bone and the feathers of a night crow, symbols of deceit and hunger. When the priests came to bless the pit, the dark spell was already woven, unseen beneath their holy chants. The day of the ritual dawned strangely quiet. The palace felt heavy, the sky veiled in copper clouds. Zola, unaware of the trap set for her, spent the morning in her mother's shrine, lighting candles and whispering prayers for her father's peace. Her white robe fluttered in the breeze like a flag of light against the coming storm. As the sun fell, the courtyard filled with people. The king sat on his golden throne, his face drawn with worry. Beside him stood Nyara, radiant in crimson silk embroidered with flames. Her eyes gleamed like molten coins and her smile was serene. Around them the elders formed a circle, each holding a torch. The sacred pit burned at the center, its flames already restless, as if something within sought to break free. Zola entered quietly, guided by 2 guards. She bowed before her father and said softly, "You sent for me, father?" Olen's voice trembled as he spoke. "The fire will speak tonight, my child. There are dark whispers in the palace. We will cleanse them together." She looked at him with confusion. "Cleanse them? But I have done nothing to stain the light." Nyara stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp as a blade wrapped in silk. "The fire shows no mercy, princess. It reveals truth, whether sweet or bitter. There have been signs, broken mirrors, trembling torches, strange winds that follow your steps. We cannot ignore them any longer." The crowd murmured uneasily. The elders exchanged glances. Zola's eyes widened, not in fear but in heartbreak. "You think I bring these things?" she asked. "You, my father?" The king's lips parted, but no sound came. He looked away. His silence was an answer more painful than any accusation. Nyara raised her arms, her bracelets chiming softly. "Let the gods decide. If she is pure, the fire will protect her. If she is cursed, the flames will cleanse the kingdom." The priests hesitated, looking to the king for command. His hand trembled as he gave a small nod. Drums began to pound in the distance, slow, deep beats that echoed like a dying heart. The people chanted ancient words, calling the fire to witness. Zola stepped toward the pit, her feet bare, her face pale but calm. The flames licked higher, golden at first, then tinged with blue. She turned once to her father. "Do you truly believe the gods would demand this?" Tears glistened in his eyes, but his voice was faint. "If your heart is pure, they will spare you." She looked then at Nyara. For the first time, there was no fear in her gaze, only a kind of pity. "You will see, stepmother," she said softly. "Fire does not belong to those who use it for hate." The queen's smile faltered for a moment, but she said nothing. The priests finished their chant. The drums stopped. For a heartbeat, the entire courtyard fell silent, so silent that even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Then Zola stepped into the flames. A collective cry rose from the crowd. The fire roared, devouring air and light, rising higher than the palace walls. The sound was like 1,000 wings beating at once. The king fell to his knees, shouting her name. Nyara stood motionless, her heart pounding in triumph, and then in terror. Because the fire did not consume Zola. Instead, it blazed brighter, whiter, purer. Her figure was visible within it, untouched, her eyes closed as if in prayer. The flames wrapped around her like a robe of light. She raised her arms slowly, and her voice rose over the roar, steady and haunting. "Mother Amelie," she whispered, her words echoing like a song carried by the wind, "if truth still lives in this kingdom, let it speak through flame." The ground trembled. The torches in the hands of the elders burst into golden light. The eternal flame at the courtyard's edge leaped higher, as if answering her call. The people fell to their knees, shielding their eyes. Then the fire spoke. Its voice was not human nor divine, but something between, a chorus that filled every corner of the courtyard, vibrating in bone and blood. It spoke the king's name, then Zola's, and then, it called Nyara. The queen stumbled backward, her face pale. The flames twisted toward her, flickering like tongues pointing accusation. In the crackle of the fire, a voice whispered, a woman's voice, tender yet fierce. "You cannot burn what was born of light." The king lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. "Amelie," he breathed. The fire hissed, answering with a flare so bright that it painted the sky gold. Zola's figure glowed within, serene and unafraid. The queen screamed, her voice lost in the roar of flame. When at last the fire calmed, only ashes remained. The wind carried them upward, scattering them like dusted gold into the night. The people wept. The king's heart shattered. And far away in the shadows beneath the palace, the sorcerer Bako smiled, for the queen's wish had come true, but not as she had imagined. For fire, once called upon, serves no master but truth itself. The fire did not roar as it should have when flesh touched it. It did not hiss or crackle in hunger. Instead, the moment Zola fell into its heart, the flames curved inward as if bowing before her. The air itself held its breath. The drums that had been beating to mark her purification slowed, their rhythm faltering as if the drummers feared their next strike would anger the gods. Queen Nyara, standing tall with her jeweled crown glinting red from the firelight, smiled faintly, expecting screams, ash, and final silence. But what came was not silence, it was a sound older than the wind itself. At first it was soft, a hum beneath the crackle of burning wood. Then it grew, rolling like thunder within the pit. The flames swelled higher, swirling in colors unseen by mortal eyes, gold deepening into violet, violet bleeding into blue. The people gasped. The king stepped forward, hand trembling around his staff, his face pale beneath the weight of disbelief. The fire, once red and raging, became calm and clear, like a living thing that breathed light. From its center, a shape formed, not Zola's burning body but a figure of light and shadow, tall and graceful. Her hair flowed like molten gold, her eyes twin suns. The voice that followed was not Zola's. It was softer, deeper, carrying the ache of 1,000 sunsets. The voice of the late Queen Ebony, the king's first wife, the mother Zola had never known. Her voice echoed across the courtyard, through the palace, into the hearts of all who had gathered. "My child," the voice whispered, and the crowd dropped to their knees. The flames pulsed with every word she spoke. "The innocent burns, yet the fire does not feast. For truth cannot be devoured." Nyara staggered backward, clutching her chest. "No, it cannot be," she murmured, her eyes wide with terror. The court sorcerer who had stood beside her dropped his staff, its charms scattering across the stones. The fire turned toward her, yes, turned, as if it had eyes that saw beyond the veil of flesh. "The fire knows the heart," the voice continued. "And your heart, Nyara, drips with envy. You poured poison into love, you clothed deceit in silk. You have betrayed not only the king but the spirits that guard this land." The king fell to his knees, tears carving paths through the ashes that clung to his face. His voice broke, trembling as he cried out, "Ebony, if this is truly you, tell me what I have done." The flames swirled again and a shape reached out from within, a hand made of light, touching nothing yet touching all. "You did not see because grief blinded you. You sought comfort where the ancestors had warned you not to look. Your sorrow became Nyara's shadow. But now the truth must burn free." The fire crackled and suddenly images began to appear within it, visions alive and moving. The people saw Nyara pouring powder into the sacred water, saw her whispering to spirits that wore masks of smoke, saw her placing charms beneath Zola's bed to twist the king's dreams. Each image danced for a heartbeat, then vanished into sparks that floated into the night sky like stars escaping the earth. The crowd murmured prayers, some weeping, some clutching the ground in fear. Even the soldiers who had bound Zola looked away, ashamed. The king covered his face, his voice hoarse. "What have I done? I doubted my own blood." Then from within the fire, Zola's voice rose, calm, melodic, unbroken by pain. "Father, I am not gone," she said, and the flames parted to reveal her form, standing in the heart of the blaze untouched. Her dress shimmered like sunlight on water, her eyes glowed with an inner fire that seemed both human and divine. "Mother walks with me. The fire does not harm me, it carries her truth." The people fell prostrate, whispering her name, Zola, the child of dawn, the flame-born princess. Nyara stumbled forward, her crown slipping from her hair. "You are no mortal," she hissed, her voice cracking. "You are a curse. A demon born of your mother's witchcraft." Zola turned her gaze toward her stepmother, her expression calm but ancient. "You call what you do not understand a curse," she said softly. "But curses are born of hearts that fear light." As she spoke, the fire flared once more, and the wind carried her words through the kingdom. The palace towers seemed to tremble, the very earth humming beneath their feet. The sacred drums began to beat again, not by human hands but by the rhythm of the air itself, a heartbeat of the ancestors rising from the deep. Then came the final moment, the moment that would be told in the kingdom for generations. The fire, now towering like a golden storm, called out the king's name in 100 voices, men, women, spirits, ancestors, and the echo of Ebony herself. "King Amadou," it cried, the sound splitting the night. "Your daughter's blood is pure. Her flame is truth. Let no shadow rule beside you again." The king, trembling, lifted his face toward the inferno, eyes filled with tears. "Zola," he called. "My child, forgive me." But the flames only glowed brighter, wrapping Zola in a halo of light so fierce that none could look directly at her. Nyara screamed as her reflection melted in the firelight, her beauty twisting, her charm unraveling. The fire roared louder, and the scent of jasmine and ashes filled the air. Then, suddenly, silence. The flames drew inward and collapsed into a single glowing ember that floated upward, spiraling into the night sky until it vanished among the stars. The courtyard was left dark, the air heavy with awe and terror. The king fell to the ground, his staff clattering beside him. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was a whisper carried on the wind, Zola's voice, gentle and distant. "The fire has spoken, father. Let truth be your crown." And with that, the night swallowed all sound but the soft hiss of dying embers, which glowed faintly, as if waiting for dawn to rise again. Days passed, yet the memory of the night the fire spoke refused to fade. The kingdom, once full of laughter and trade and song, now whispered in low voices about what had happened in the great courtyard. The elders said the ancestors had risen. The priests said the gods had judged. But among the people, one name carried through the air like smoke: Zola. Children left small bowls of milk and flowers by the fire pits, hoping the princess who walked with flames would bless their homes. The palace, however, no longer slept in peace. At dusk, the torches along the corridors began to burn blue instead of gold. Their light shimmered cold and strange, casting shadows that moved even when the air was still. Servants whispered that the fire no longer obeyed the queen. When Yara walked by, the flames bent away from her, as though the very light recoiled from her presence. She ordered the torches extinguished, but they relit themselves before dawn. Nyara's reflection, once the source of her pride, began to betray her. The first time it happened, she was brushing her long hair before her silver mirror when she saw her reflection frown though her face remained still. Startled, she dropped her comb. The reflection whispered, "You cannot hide from what burns beneath your skin." The glass shivered, cracked, and melted into water. Nyara screamed and fled her chamber. That same night, thunder rumbled over the palace though no storm touched the horizon. The guards saw sparks rise from the courtyard where Zola had vanished, small at first like fireflies gathering above the ground. Then before their eyes the ashes began to swirl, rising in spirals that glowed red, orange, and gold. A soft wind carried a scent of rain and smoke, and within the shimmer of heat, a figure began to form. Zola stepped forth from the circle of ash, barefoot, her skin glowing faintly like polished bronze beneath sunlight. Etched along her arms and neck were patterns, lines of light like molten gold, flowing as if alive. Her hair shimmered with a soft radiance, and her eyes held both tenderness and power, as though she had looked upon eternity and returned with its secrets. The guards dropped to their knees, too afraid to speak. Zola looked at them, not with anger but with a calm sorrow that stilled their trembling hearts. "Do not fear," she said, her voice carrying warmth that filled the courtyard. "The fire has judged, and I am its messenger." Word spread swiftly through the palace. Servants knelt where they stood. Even the birds that roost on the rooftops took flight, circling above the palace as if welcoming their lost princess. The king, hearing the commotion, rushed to the courtyard, disbelief clouding his face. When his eyes met Zola's, he stumbled, tears rushing to the surface. "My daughter," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I saw you burn. I saw the flames take you." Zola stepped toward him. Where her bare feet touched the marble, warmth spread, and tiny golden flowers bloomed from the cracks in the stone. "Fire takes nothing that belongs to truth," she said softly. "It only purifies what is real." The king reached for her, but she only placed her hand over his heart. The light from her palm sank into his chest, and his breathing steadied. "You still carry guilt," she murmured. "Let it burn away. My mother walks in peace. Her voice will not haunt the living any longer." He fell to his knees, overcome, his tears steaming as they hit the warm marble. But far above them, hidden behind the drapes of her chamber, Queen Yara watched. Her hands shook. She whispered to herself, "No, this cannot be, she cannot have returned." Her mind replayed every word the fire had spoken. "You poured poison into love, your heart drips with envy," each echo carved deeper into her sanity. That night, Nyara dreamt of flames crawling beneath her skin. She awoke with a scream, sweat pouring down her face, only to find her chamber filled with flickering lights. The air shimmered, and in the center of her room stood Zola, glowing faintly, her eyes calm and unblinking. "Stay away from me," Nyara cried, backing toward the wall. "You are not real. You are a ghost sent to torment me. Zola tilted her head slightly, the ember-like markings along her arms glowing brighter. I'm no ghost, Nyara. I am what you created, the truth that will not be buried. Nyara clutched her chest, gasping. You should have burned. I saw you fall. The fire does not destroy those who walk with light, Zola said. But it shows what lies hidden in the hearts of those who fear it. As she spoke, every torch in the palace blazed alive with blue fire. The mirrors that lined the queen's chamber cracked and melted, each reflection of Nyara twisting into distorted, hollow faces that laughed softly in unison. Nyara screamed and fell to the floor, clutching her head as the room spun around her. Make it stop, she sobbed. Please? I will confess, I will tell them everything, just end this. Zola knelt before her, her gaze steady but kind. The fire cannot be begged, she whispered. It only listens. She placed her glowing hand upon Nyara's forehead, and the queen's body stiffened. Images rushed through her mind, every lie, every charm, every drop of poison she had poured into the king's heart. The memories burned through her, scorching the deceit she had carried for years. When Zola withdrew her hand, Nyara collapsed, trembling. Her once smooth skin shimmered with faint scorch marks that glowed for a heartbeat, then faded. Her beauty was still there, but it no longer shone. It was hollow, an empty shell that no longer deceived. Zola stood, her light dimming slightly as she turned toward the window. Truth will no longer hide behind your crown, she said softly. The kingdom will remember your deeds. But I will not hate you, Nyara. Fire does not hate, it only reveals. She stepped out onto the balcony where dawn was breaking. The first rays of sunlight touched her skin, merging with the glow that already lived within her. Below, the people gathered, bowing as one. They called her name, not in fear but in reverence. From that day onward, wherever Zola walked, warmth followed. Sick trees began to blossom again, rivers shimmered with gold beneath the sun, and the palace air no longer carried the scent of ashes but of renewal. The people called her the Fire Child, guardian of truth. But Nyara, haunted by her own reflection, wandered the palace halls like a ghost. Every flame she saw whispered her guilt. Every mirror reflected not her face but the one she had tried to destroy. And in her eyes grew the madness of a woman who had seen the fire's judgment and could never escape its lig.